Hello, welcome to class time, your daily classroom for CSEC and CAPE students. Now we are still in section 2 of the syllabus that looks specifically today at our topic, resource allocation and economic systems. So let's begin. So for our objectives today, we are going to explain the term resource allocation. We're going to also define the term economic systems, and we're going to define the types of economic systems. They are listed there: subsistent, command, free market, and mixed. We're also going to outline the characteristics or the features of each economic systems and look to explain some of the advantages and disadvantages of each economic system. Now, based on what we have done before, we realize that we utilize the factors of production, which is land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial skills, to make or to produce goods and services. Now, how we are going to utilize them refers to as resource allocation. So by way of explaining the term, it is simply the act of dividing the resources, the scarce resources that are available to produce the different goods and services to meet the needs and the wants of the society. Now, remember we said before that resources are scarce and the wants and the needs of the society are infinite. That means they are unlimited. And so a government, a society must decide how they are going to find a way to divide the resources that are available to meet these competing wants. Again, we have mentioned this before, but it comes into play here again. We have our resources. They are limited. And so as a society, we must answer these three basic questions. What are we going to produce? Are we going to produce more cars? Are we going to make available more food? Are we going to build more roads or schools or housing with the resources that we have? Then once that decision is made, how should these goods and services be produced? How to produce? What is the method of production? Is it going to be capital intensive, meaning that we're using a lot of machinery to do the work? Or is it labor intensive, where they're going to utilize more human capital, more manual labor to make the goods and services available? And the last question, for whom? Who will get these goods and services? And it's regardless of their income, because some goods and services may be produced, when we look at the economic systems later on, that some goods are luxury goods, and therefore only persons with certain amount of income will be able to afford them, while there are some goods and services that are there, that are produced to meet the basic needs of the society, and so everyone must be able to afford them. So again, in allocating our resources, we must answer the three basic questions: what to produce, how to produce, and for whom. Now, an economic system, by way of definition, is really now looking at the means by which the society or the government is going to organize and distribute the available resources to produce goods and services for the country. So they are looking at their land, they are looking at their labor and capital, and how they are going to allocate these resources to produce the goods and services for the country. So the term economic system is really looking at how we are going to regulate the factors of production, land, labor, and capital, to satisfy the wants and needs of a society. All right. So we're going to jump into the first system, which is called the subsistent or the traditional economic system. Now, what you'll find with this system, that each community or society or household, they will produce the goods and services to satisfy their own needs. So what you will find is that each household will grow their own food. They will make their own clothes. They hunt for the food that they need, the meat that they need. So they hunt animals. They will go fishing in rivers and lakes and sea, right? They normally will build their houses with the material that is around them. So as you are thinking, yes, that was a very, what we'll call a primitive way of life then, but it worked because we'll find that they were able to supply the needs and the wants for their families, all right? So the subsistent or the traditional economic system was there as what we call a self-sufficient kind of economic system where persons did what they needed to provide for their needs and wants and for their families. So that one, there was a little mix up there. So in this type of economic system, we'll find that goods are shared among members of the community, and it encouraged what we call trading. So once they had a surplus of the goods and services that they produce. So for example, if I was about producing my tomatoes and my cabbage and my Scotch bonnet pepper, and I had a surplus because I had enough to supply, I would probably go to my neighbor and say, listen, I have some tomato and cabbage and some pepper, and they may be growing peas and other things. I'll probably have a chicken farm, and therefore we'll do what we call bartering, the exchange of goods for other goods. So you'll find that there wasn't any money per se. In this system, what they would do is exchange goods and services for goods and services. You also found that under this traditional system, there was little to no government involvement. So there were no regulations as it relates to what government stipulates in terms of what you can produce or cannot produce. So some of the examples there was before the 20th century, some section of South America and Asia. And we'll also find that in some rural areas in the Caribbean, they still operate as a subsistent system where they produce. So they would have their own little garden, they would have their own little farm, and they would share with their neighbors. I kind of like that very much, especially in these times. So what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of this subsistent or traditional economic system? The first one is that it creates advantage, is that it creates strong community ties and harmony. So you'll find that persons who are more neighborly, they live good because, you want to be able to have that relationship where you can exchange your produce with your neighbors, all right? And what you also find is that only what is needed for survival is produced. Good? So whatever persons need, they utilize it. So you find that there was little wastage taking place. Disadvantages, however, is that there was a lack of variety in terms of goods and services available to individuals. What you will find, and what we mean by that, is that it goes down from generation to generation. So if my grandfather was a cassava farmer, it would come right down the line. The future generation would just be cassava producers. If they were just into pig rearing or chicken rearing or goat rearing, you'll find that that is what continues. So there wasn't much variety in that system. And the last disadvantage is that the method of production used was usually outdated, which led to what we call low productivity. And we talked about productivity last week. So you don't find much machinery being used, latest technology being used. Sometimes it's just your basic hoe and machete and so on. You don't find a lot of fancy irrigation systems taking place. again, because these persons, they were just producing enough to satisfy their family needs, their family wants. All right? So let's move to the next economic system, what is called the command or the planned economic system. Now, this system, one of the features of this system is that the government own and control all of the productive activities in that society. Everything is totally under the dictatorship of the government. So what you will find is that the government own and control the factors of production, and they determine how the resources will be allocated amongst the goods that they must produce. They will dictate what goods they believe are necessity items, what goods are luxury items, and the food that must be produced. Also under this economic system is that the government determines how much must be produced and the items to be produced. So there was not much discussion taking place there. They would make or call the shots, so to speak, about what must be produced, and they also determine the distribution of wealth. Now, let us reason it. If they own the factors of production, and we know that if you put the factors of production to work and you get the rewards of the factors of production, the rewards is going back to whom? The owners of the factors of production. So we find that, that kind of system was quite rigid. No, another name, or what you'll see in your text as you go along, is that the command or the planned economies are referred to as socialist or communist economies. And I know sometimes you probably hear these terms being thrown around, whether in the media or in discussion. Now you know where it is coming from. And the aim of these economies is that they wanted to create equality in the society where everyone worked and received the goods and services that they needed. All right, so it's really trying to make everyone in the society, so to speak, equal. There was supposed to be some amount of equity. Under this system, we also find that education and health is at a little to no cost, low income, housing is provided, and there's a low cost of food. Because as I said to you before, this is a situation where they need everyone to be on the same page in terms of equity. And what we find also is that entertainment, television, and newspaper was controlled by the government. All right? The examples are there, North Korea and Cuba. Now let's look at some of the advantages. And you are saying, oh, miss, the advantages to this system? Yes, they are. All right, so what you find is that the necessity items were provided and available for all. Remember, one of the features is that the prices were usually very low. And for that specific reason, that everyone could have access to those goods and services. All right? What you also find is that there are no wastage of resources since the government decides what is to be produced. So there is no wastage at all under this system. Profits earned, they are used by the government to expand the production or to provide other social amenities such as schools and hospitals, roads for the society. And what you find again, mentioned again here, is that prices were usually low and income was more evenly distributed. Disadvantages, however, is that even though the government dictates what must be produced, if they are producing things or items that the society is not interested in, then you're going to find wastage of resources because they're going to produce it and persons do not want it. All right? So there's another thing in terms of disadvantage is that they say that goods and services may be of poor quality, because sometimes mass production may lead to that, and the fact that they have to make the prices low and they are not motivated particularly by profit, then, not always the best material and technology is used in the production process. And you also find that there are very few choices for individuals under this system, because again, the government dictates what must be produced. Now let's look at another economic system. This one is called the free market or the laissez-faire. And I will not be calling that term very often. I don't want to twist my tongue. Now, under this economic system, you'll find that the consumer is king, meaning the consumer dictates what must be produced. So the manufacturers, the producers, they go by what the consumers are saying. Because what you will find is that because they, private individuals and organizations, own and control the factors of production, they are about making profit, earning that money, and so they are going to produce what people want. All right, so it's here that private individuals and organizations, they own and control the factors of production, and because they control the production process, they are also motivated by profit. And that makes sense. If you're about making money, then you're going to produce what is going to sell. So again, just remember that under this economic system, the consumer is king. So what you'll find, therefore, now that the prices of goods and services are usually high, right? So the consumers, because of, and we're going to go into it in a little bit, the competition for the goods and services will cause prices to be competitive. Under this system also, consumers are free to choose the goods and services to satisfy the wants and needs of their household, right? So they have choices here. In the previous economic system, under the plan or the command system, there was little to no choice. The government dictates, but here, private individuals are involved in the production and they are going to offer consumers a wide variety of goods and services to choose from. This economic system is also called capitalist, where private ownership and competition between the business drives the economy. So that competitive feeling, the advertising to say, oh, my product is better than that product because, or they will highlight the features of their product to say why consumers should go for their product and not for their competitors. Of course, it's to our advantage, as you will see. Now, the pricing mechanism, or how pricing is determined under this market, is through the interaction of the forces of demand and supply. So the consumers, they will drive the demand, what it is that they want, what kind of goods and services they need. And of course, the producers will do their utmost best to supply that demand. And that is for a later topic when we look at the whole interaction of demand and supply and how prices are determined in the market. So let's look at the advantages of this system. And the first one is there that consumers have a wide variety of goods and services to choose from. So, let us look, example, for toothpaste. Some persons probably like Colgate versus Lascaux or another brand, or who want the baking soda to whiten their teeth, all kind of things. They have choices. Producers are free to make goods and services that the consumers need. And so what you'll find is that there is little interaction of the government. They really rarely intervene into the market, and so competition between the businesses drives creativity, efficiency, and innovation. So firms are competing against each other. They want to offer to their consumers something that is different, so they get very creative, right? They will mix and match all kinds of features and get feedback from the consumers, what they want. And of course, that drives innovation and creativity in any economy. Disadvantages? Yes, there are. What you'll find is that some of the basic goods and services are not usually produced. And the reason for this is that those goods and services don't usually yield high profits. Because as I said before, under the plan system, the government will provide these basic goods and services so that everyone, regardless of your income level, you must be able to afford those goods and services. So private firms really will not produce those goods and services. Second disadvantage is that consumers may be exploited through high prices that are for goods and services that are essential that the government is not able to provide. So how is it Miss A just said that they don't provide certain basic things? I will just give you a quick example. Let us look at transportation. Now, the government provides transportation through the JUTC. It's owned and operated by the government. But they do not have enough buses to cover all the routes, and so they will give out what is called franchising to other entities, and you have other private persons. Now, the fare that you pay on JUTC is different from the fare that you pay on probably a coaster bus. You see where I'm getting? So even though it is a basic need, the prices are different because you want the service, all right? And it's not provided by the government. What you'll also find under this economic system, that the gap between the rich and the poor becomes very significant. There are some items that, based on the pricing, those who are of lower income levels will not be able to afford it, and so only the rich will be able to enjoy those kinds of goods and services. And this is our last economic system, the mixed economy. And from the term alone, you know what it is. It's a combination of two economic systems. So what you'll find under this system, you'll find features of the planned or command system and features of the free market system. And that's what most economies these days operate under a mixed economic system. So what are the features? You'll find that both the government and private individuals own and operate the factors of production, right? So they have, I wouldn't say it's equal, but they own factors of production, and so they will produce goods and services accordingly. Now, both the government and private individuals make decisions on what to produce, how to produce, and for whom. So you'll find that there's a balance now within the economy. The government will provide mostly the basic needs and necessities, and the private firms will provide the wants. Needs versus wants, right? You'll find, as I said before, that the government will provide essential goods and services for the citizens, such as health, education, transportation, roads, and other social welfare for the citizens. And that whole sector is referred to as the public sector. Where private individuals now own the resources and the businesses, they will provide other goods and services, not necessarily the basic things, but other goods and services, and they are referred to as the private sector. So just to stick there again, what the government and their entities and activities entails, they are referred to as the public sector, and private individuals owning factors of production and making their activities in the economy, they are referred to as the private sector. Now, what are some of the advantages? Because we have the involvement of the government in this economic system, they provide protection for the consumers against any form of unfair trading practices through laws and legislations. And I just put a few there on the screen. We have what we call our Consumer Affairs Commission. We have the Office of the Utilities Regulation, the OUR, and we have our Bureau of Standards of Jamaica. These are just some of the entities that are there to ensure that consumers are getting fair pricing, consumers are getting the goods and services in an acceptable form, they are safe for use and will not cause any form of harm to the consumers. So that's one of the major advantages, that with the involvement of the government in this mixed economic system, consumers are protected from unfair trading practices through laws and regulations. Another advantage is that both public and private sectors can cooperate to provide essential services through franchising, such as transportation and hospital services. And as I mentioned to you before, that JUTC is there, yes, as a government-owned entity for transportation, but they cannot provide enough buses and so on to cover all the routes in Jamaica and to go everywhere. So they franchise. And so that is what you will call a cooperation between public sector and private sector. Hospital services. There are some hospitals that are what we call public hospitals. Kingston Public Hospital, Spanish Town Hospital. But we have other hospitals, whether it's the Andrews Memorial or the Nuttall Hospital, they provide similar services, but we know that the prices at those hospitals will not be those at the KPH. All right? So persons who are able to afford the services will utilize those services. Then we have our disadvantages. And the first one here is that too much government intervention can discourage innovation by the private sector. And what do I mean by that? Sometimes there are what they call red tape, a lot of bureaucracy, things that the private sector have to go through to get registered and licensed and permits and so on, that sort of discourage innovation or makes the process very hard and slow, and so they may get discouraged in the market because of too much regulations and what we call in Jamaica red tape, too much things to go through. Another disadvantage is that the public sector services sometimes may not be sufficient, there may not be sufficient funding to make it efficient. Meaning, as we know, sometimes there's not enough resources in terms of funding, and so they may not be able to provide services that we think they should be doing. But now, I'm seeing a lot more innovation with the public sector in terms of paying taxes and so on online, and that I'm sure has alleviated a lot of stress in that department. So now it's time to do some questions, and I hope that you are paying attention and that you'll be able to manage the few questions that we have here before we go into our recap. So let's start. The first question here: which of the following practices are characteristics of a free economy? Private ownership of assets, central planning, price fixing, or freedom of choice? So is your answer A, looking at 1 and 3, which is private ownership and price fixing, no? Or, yes, so your answer will be 1, private ownership of assets, and number 4, freedom of choice. So your answer there would be B. Let's go to another question. Which of the following is not a feature of the planned economy. All resources are owned by the state. Consumers' demand determine what the government produces. Prices are determined by the government, and the government determines how income is distributed. Giving you a few seconds. And I'm sure you have the right answer. The answer there is B also. Consumer demands determine what the government produces. That is not a feature of the plan. That's a feature of the free market. The third question. Which of the following does not describe an economic system? Communal, mixed, planned, or command? And yes, that one is quite obvious. The answer there is A, communal. That is not an economic system at all. Now, let us just look at this question. A question that I would deem to be a typical exam question. And we may not go through all the answers here today, but I just want you to be careful in terms of how you answer a question for exam. So it says here, list 3 types of economic systems. B, what are the 3 questions an economy must answer? C, differentiate between goods and services and give an example of each. And D, part D, discuss 3 benefits that may be derived from a free market system. Now, I have highlighted some terms that you must pay attention to. So if you're asked to list, that's quite easy. You're just going to put it down there in point form. And your 3 economic systems, you know the answer. You can either say subsistent or traditional, your planned economic system, your free market, or your mix. So we have 4, so any 3 of the 4, you will get your full 3 marks. It asks, what are the 3 questions an economy must answer? Again here, based on this, you can just state the answers there. What to produce, how to produce, and for whom. Good. Now it says for this one, differentiate. So you differentiate means that you're going to show why they are different. So goods and services, we looked at the last class. So we know that a good is a tangible item that you can touch, while services, it is not tangible, it is intangible. Don't forget the part that says give an example. So a good can be a bottle of soda, while services can be your hairdressing services, barbering, a spa treatment, or doing your transaction at the bank or online banking. Those are services. Now here is where sometimes our students, candidates, they do not earn full marks. Here it says discuss 3 benefits that may be derived from the free market. Discuss means that you are going to put some explanation on each point that you are going to make. So 3 benefits there, they are referring to 3 advantages. So you cannot, students, boys and girls, you cannot put it in point form and expect to get the full marks. You must say something on that point. So if you want to say one of the benefits of the free market is that their consumers have a wide variety of choices in terms of goods and services. Why? Why is that so? And you explain a little more. And you will do that for all your points so that you can maximize your full marks in the examination. So again, when you see discuss, do not put it in point form and leave it like that, like the cheese stand alone. I always say to myself, my students, don't drop it like tambourine and leave it. You must put some flesh onto your points. It is a discussion. All right? So I hope this tip will help you in your future exams. So let us recap what it is that we have done today. Today we looked at the term resource allocation. And we said that resource allocation is simply how we divide the factors of production to produce the goods and services that are needed within the economy. And we already know that the resources are scarce and the needs and the wants of a society, they are infinite. And so the government must choose what they're producing, how they're going to produce, and for whom. We looked at the 4 economic systems. That is the subsistent or the traditional economic system, the planned or the command economic system, the free market or the laissez-faire market system, and the mixed, that is a combination of both the command and the free market system. And we also looked at their various advantages and disadvantages of those systems.